Time to paint the skull and the other assorted bony bits. Undercoated the bones with some, I think it was just a brown, it doesn't matter, medium brown, leather brown, I think. Let's call it that, sure. Mainly because I had to paint the hand that's attached to the staff, the sai. And so went ahead and painted everything with that color. Just leaving it in the eye sockets at the moment. Already undercoated it with some Vallejo model color buff. And now I'm covering that up with some, ironically, game color bone white. The Death in the Discworld miniseries is pretty much gray, and I thought about going that route, but the black robe and gray bone, almost said skin, would just make it look, I think, a little bit visually, a little bit too, black and white. So decided to go with the buff and the bone, which has a little bit more yellow in it. Though the buff, I'm going to be covering up most of that. And I got a little glaze medium in here. And just slowly building up the color, mostly like I would if I was painting flesh. One of the Batman and Robin figures. So hopefully we'll get a little color transition too. And I'm painting this first, not doing the hands right now. And I'll paint the hands at the same time, so if I make any changes accidentally while painting them, I don't want to paint the head and one hand and then have to paint the other hand. But I can do in 2 steps here, paint this head and then do the 2 hands. So if there's any slight differences, you're not going to be able to tell, because it's kind of like 2 separate pieces, if you follow my confusing meaning. So after I get a few more coats of this down, we'll do white, and we'll build up the white and see how far we want to go. Maybe we'll do a wash or 2. We shall see. So we highlighted up to almost pure white with the bone white mixed in, and did the teeth. Teeth was, oh good lord, now I forgot what I used. Yellow ochre mixed with, I think yellow ochre and white, that's what I used. So that is done. And did a little cleanup work with black in the eye sockets, and now I'm just kind of giving it a light wash using a mix of gray and the original buff. This is kind of like adding color to the cheeks if this was a human figure. Just kind of blending in a little bit of gray, because I did say I didn't want to go too yellow with the bone. And the reason why I'm not going yellow with the bone, if you haven't figured it out, bone tends to be more yellow on fresher bone. You think like when you eat a chicken. But as it dries out, it loses that color. So we don't want a fresh death. That would be silly. But just adding a little bit of color into the recesses. And then we'll almost be done. At least with the head. Ooga booga. Check it out. Hey, I gave Death blue eyes. Yeah. I don't know if it's in the books, but he has blue eyes once again in the TV miniseries. So thought I'd just show that off real quick. Another thing, wanted to show real quick here, because I just noticed it. I was kind of disappointed because I did this hand first, and notice it seems to have like claws practically. So I was really disappointed that they would give the Grim Reaper like real long claws like an animal. And then I did the other hand, and he doesn't have claws. He's got regular fingers. So they actually made the last digit super long into a pointy claw on one hand, and then regular human looking on the other. So yeah, that's good job there, guys. Thank you, Moebius. Unfortunately, there's really no way to fix that. I mean, unless you scrape everything off and sculpt your own skeletal hand. Also, the bone structure, I use that gray and buff wash, a little bit thicker this time and a little bit darker to try to get some definition in the bones still. And also here, there's the fingers. There was no delineation between the digits. Yeah, at least we're almost getting done here. Well, would you look at that? We finished another part of this kit. Yes, I have the Grim Reaper done, I hope. Wouldn't be surprised if I find more mistakes that I have to fix, but for the moment it is done. And I did a lot of little very small bits on camera, or off camera, excuse me, that I will go over now. The skull finished as I showed you. Flat varnished everything here, by the way, and added a little bit of gloss to the teeth. I think I actually may want to go back and add a little bit more. And I added eyeballs. Those are actually, I could have just put spots of paint, but I wanted something with a little more depth, physical depth. So I just put cut little slivers of styrene rod and dropped them in there and painted them a light blue. The sigh, I went back and I added a little bit of yellow ochre into the wood, and then I coated everything with some semi-gloss on that. The side blade itself was painted with various the tester's metal colors. I was tempted to go like full chrome on it, but I decided against it. I didn't want it too shiny. I did go back and I had to sand it down quite a bit because I painted it and it was a bit too rough, and I wanted a smoother texture because the reflection is going to work a lot better on a smooth surface. So went back with some 1000 grit sandpaper. Would have liked it to sand a little bit more, but this joint started to weaken, so I think it's good enough as is. The rope belts I added, thought about doing it brown, but I decided just to stick with the gray colors. Just highlighted by hand with some Vallejo Model Masters German gray. And the damn hourglass, which I kept forgetting to mention in other parts of the video. So I think I showed that I was just putting a dull coat over it and then an enamel wash. That did not work out because it was going over bare metal. When I went to wipe off the enamel wash, it ended up peeling up the varnish because it was a cheap acrylic varnish, and it just peeled up like latex. So I had to reverse the order, do the enamel wash first, then varnish coat it. But then I realized the gold color would look a little bit off, and also his Death's Hourglass in Hogfather and Color Magic is actually like pewter. So had to remask everything, and then I painted it once again with some of the Vallejo metal colors. So that's took a lot more effort than it should have. And oh, the big thing. This cool little thing here. Death has a little emblem there. I knew it wouldn't be able to match it exactly, but what I did is I went to the art store, and luckily the first thing that I saw turned out to work the best. It's one of these little things. These are puffy little plastic key stickers, I'm assuming for scrapbooking. And all I did was clip one of the key heads off, clean it up a little bit, and paint it and glue it right on there. So I was planning on doing something there, and then I forgot about it, and so it was kind of a last-minute addition. But so far, our guy's looking pretty neat, I think. Fairly simple. Not much you can screw up with just painting black. So next, finally, we have to finish the base. And here is the base. Already mentioned I wasn't using the original base that came with the kit. Went with a wood plaque that I sanded down a whole bunch and tried to make it smooth as possible. Got the tree in place, and the ground texture itself, I went with, I forgot to look up the name of this damn stuff before turning on the camera. It's paper mache, clayish type material. You can get it at craft stores. I think it's ground up paper, actually. It's white, very light and fluffy. However, this is not exactly that. This is something that I bet none of you are going to be able to find because it's way out of production. I actually got this from Hudson and Allen, which I don't think they're around anymore, but they had a ground texture stuff that was that same material you get at a craft store, but it had some brown dye in it and some rocks and a few little bits and bobs. And I used up the last of it doing this base. Just mix it up with water and a whole lot of white glue and spackle it on. Takes a while to dry. Make sure you coat your base with some sort of waterproofing liquid before putting it on. And even I clamped the base to the desk so it would reduce any warpage to the wood. And it took about 3 days to dry because it does dry slowly. And then I realized I had it a bit too smooth, so I went back and added a few more kind of hills and what have you around. So this is where the project slows down a little bit for me, because I have to wait for this to dry again a day or two and continue on, and I'm waiting for some parts, and I have other things that I have to wait for them to dry and prep, so things are going to slow down, but whatever happens, you're going to be able to see next. Finally putting the finishing touches on the Gravestone, and this was the biggest pain in the butt out of the entire kit. Mort. You think just putting letters onto a gravestone would be easy. It was not. As I mentioned, I tried carving them in, and I wasn't very good at carving, so I thought, well, I'll just get raised letters and I'll put it on the tombstone instead. And that started a whole adventure into madness. You would think that finding letters small enough to fit on this thing would be easy. It was not. Trying to find individual letters of this size to fit on this gravestone, like it took forever. I first got these from eBay. These are little laser cut wood letters, and I think these are 3/8 size. They turned out to be too big. Height-wise, they were good, but they're way too wide. I couldn't fit Mort on here, especially with the wide letters like O and M. So that didn't work out. And I started looking around for other letters, and you know what? No one makes them. You can't find individual letters like this at a scale smaller than, like, I was looking at a 1/4 inch or around a little bit bigger than that. Maybe 12 inches. Not 12 inches, I'm sorry. 12 millimeters. Couldn't think of anything, and I thought about all different ways I can do it. I eventually went back to a idea that I had right after those letters didn't work. I didn't think this would work, but it actually did. These are little trinkets that you can buy, little alphabet trinkets for doing, I don't know, necklaces or little bracelets and things like that. You can spell your name out. And this ended up working, which is great, because the only other option I had was to get railroads. For railroad dioramas, you can buy little raised plastic letters and cut them out of a sprue. Which they were about $12, $15 for a set, and this turned out to be $4. And so all I had to do was just clip off that little ring there, and then glue them on, and we were finally good to go. A little taller than I would like, but the letters are much more narrow. I know, it would have been so much easier just to carve them in crudely, but after finding out it was so hard to find them, it became a challenge to me. So it was a pointless victory. Anyway, long story there, I know. To paint this thing, Vallejo Game Color Cold Gray, highlight with some Stonewall Gray. And then I did the letters with some darkened, I think it was Gun Gray, Vallejo Model Air mixed with black. And I already gave it a few enamel washes of black and some greens, and now I'm just kind of rusting up the letters a little bit with some Vallejo Panzer Aces rust. And then next I'm going to take the military green that I used on the tree and work a bit more green into the base of this thing. And then I'm going to put it on, and we'll start on the base, the last part. That's going to take a while too.
Well, it's the end of the world as we know it, and actually I feel a little bit gassy, but otherwise I'm fine.